Halcyon Bay floated above the clouds like a city made of glass, steel, and white stone, with bright bridges stretching between tall towers and wind rails humming softly in the open air. Sunlight touched the rooftops in the morning and turned the whole city gold, while storm clouds often gathered below the city and made the streets feel far above the world. People here lived by strict rules because every gate, every bridge, and every sky lane mattered. The Sky Guardians kept order, protected the trade routes, and made sure no one fell from the high city into the endless air below. Aiden was one of those guardians, a tall young man with black hair, a calm face, and a steady heart that once made people trust him without question. He wanted only to serve, to protect the city, and to prove that honor could matter more than pride. His squad mattered to him because they were his chosen family, and he believed they would stand beside him no matter what came. But the central problem of this story was already in motion, because Aiden had been framed for a disaster he did not cause, and if the truth stayed hidden, Halcyon Bay would keep falling deeper into the hands of liars. The squad that betrayed him was led by Captain Drake, a man with gray hair, sharp eyes, and a cold voice that always sounded calm even when he was lying. Drake wanted power, respect, and access to the city control towers, because he believed the Sky Guardians should rule through fear instead of duty. Beside him stood Victor, a smooth man with silver hair, clean clothes, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Victor was not a fighter first, but he was dangerous because he controlled money, supplies, and many of the city council votes. He wanted the city to become easier to control, and he was willing to help anyone who made that possible. On the night Aiden was blamed, a bridge alarm rang across the upper district, lights flashed red, and one of the main wind engines shut down at the wrong moment. The city nearly lost a whole quarter to the drop, and before Aiden could explain what he saw, Drake and Victor pinned the blame on him. They said Aiden had opened the safety locks. They said he had let the disaster happen. They said his own judgment had failed the city. Aiden tried to fight for the truth, but the squad he trusted closed ranks against him, and the people who once cheered for him turned away in fear. He was stripped of his badge, forced out into exile, and left with nothing but a broken name. Years passed and Halcyon Bay changed in painful ways. Some towers grew taller, some bridges were replaced, and some streets became covered with guards who no longer served the people first. Drake rose higher inside the Skyguard, Victor gained influence inside the council halls, and fear began to live in the city like a second weather. Then, on a night of black clouds and blue lightning, Aiden returned. He came alone through the fog on a quiet sky skiff, wearing a dark coat with torn edges and carrying a sealed core of frost that looked alive under his hand. This was the living frost engine, a rare machine born from ancient sky crystal and cold storm energy, and it could do something almost no other power could do. It could freeze motion itself. A rushing blade could stop in the air. A falling chain could hang still. A charging enemy could become trapped inside a moment that refused to move. Aiden had found the engine during his exile in a frozen ruin beyond the cloud line, and he had learned to bind it to his own breath and heartbeat. He did not return to save his honor. He returned because the lie had grown too large, and because he had learned that the same people who ruined him had kept hurting the city ever since. His first goal was simple and dangerous. He would find Drake, force the truth into the open, and uncover who had used his fall to build a darker plan. Aiden moved through the city like a shadow with a pulse. He watched patrol routes, listened to dock workers, and followed hidden supply lines where stolen gear disappeared each night. His only open ally was Myra, a young woman with brown hair, a grease-stained coat, and a bright, fast mind that made her useful in any machine room. Myra was a city engineer who repaired wind rails and bridge locks, and she wanted the city to stay free from the hands of cruel men. She had once seen parts of the original disaster and never trusted the official story. At first, she did not trust Aiden either, because a man who returned from exile in silence looked like a threat before he looked like a friend. But when she saw him freeze a swinging gate in midair to save a child from a patrol crush, she understood that he was not there to hurt the city. She gave him maps, hidden routes, and one warning that changed everything. The traitors were not only hiding, they were searching for something in the old sky records, and they were doing it for someone wearing a mask. Aiden asked who that person was, but Myra only shook her head and said the city had begun to whisper about a wraith that moved through the upper halls without leaving a clear face behind. The hunt turned violent at the bridges. Drake sent skyguards to corner Aiden on the east span, where the wind whipped hard between broken railings and the clouds below flashed with distant lightning. The fight was not about killing or blood. It was about control, fear, and who would stand when the bridge started to break. Aiden raised his frost engine and blue cold spilled outward in a clean ring. Spears of ice locked the bridge cables in place. Boots skidded to a stop. Swinging blades froze before they could land. His enemies expected speed, but he robbed them of motion itself. Drake fought with brutal skill, using heavy steel gloves and body armor that let him smash through frozen barriers when his rage peaked. He shouted that Aiden had always been too soft, too blind, too loyal to a world that did not deserve loyalty. Aiden did not answer. He only watched, learned, and pushed Drake back inch by inch until a bridge section collapsed behind the captain and forced his squad to retreat. That was the first clear victory, but it also brought the first deep clue. In the middle of the clash, Aiden saw a symbol carved into a hidden support beam, a thin black mark shaped like a hooked eye. Myra recognized it from old records and went pale. That mark belonged to an old secret order that should have vanished years ago. The next stop was the Storm Tower district, where the tallest buildings stood like spears against the sky and thunder rolled between their antenna crowns. There Aiden found Victor meeting with council agents in a glass chamber lit by lightning. Victor was not surprised to see him. In fact, he looked almost relieved, as if Aiden had finally walked into the path Victor had built. He explained, with calm and poisonous patience, that Aiden had always been useful as a symbol. A loyal guardian made a perfect fall guy. A broken hero made the city easier to steer. Victor wanted the city afraid enough to accept new laws, new guards, and new locks on every bridge. He believed that if people feared disorder, they would beg to be controlled. But Victor also revealed a second truth, one that hit harder than his lies. He said Drake had not planned everything alone. Someone else had shown them where to aim, when to strike, and how to erase evidence from the city records. Before Aiden could press him further, the glass chamber filled with black mist, and a masked wraith stepped out from the shadow between two lightning flashes. The figure wore a smooth white mask with no mouth, a long dark robe, and gloves that seemed to drink in light. Even without a clear face, the wraith felt familiar in a terrible way. The wraith spoke in a low voice and said Aiden had finally returned to the place where his shadow had first been stolen. That was the revelation that changed everything. The masked wraith had been using a copy of Aiden's shadow as a key, shaping false signs and false trails so the city would always point at him. The wraith wanted more than blame. It wanted time, power, and a future that could be bent before it arrived. By feeding on fear and repeating old lies, it had made the city easier to guide. Aiden realized the betrayal was not just revenge from his old squad. It was a planned rewrite of the city itself. Drake and Victor had served as useful hands, but the real mind behind them had been the masked wraith all along. Myra searched old archives while Aiden chased the next clue, and together they found the final mark leading to the floating arena above the central plaza. This arena was used for public duels, guardian trials, and policy displays, but now it had been turned into a rotating battlefield full of shifting platforms and moving walls. There, the wraith planned to seal the city under a final false order before dawn. Aiden climbed into the arena as the storm broke open above Halcyon Bay. Wind slammed through the arches, banners snapped in the dark, and the whole ring shifted as hidden gears turned beneath the floor. Drake stood on one side with the last loyal fighters he had left, while Victor watched from a high balcony, ready to claim any outcome that helped him. Then the masked wraith appeared at the center, and the whole arena dimmed as if the light itself feared the truth. Aiden moved first. He sent a pulse from the living frost engine, and the nearest platforms froze in place, letting him run across them where others would fall. The wraith answered by bending shadows into false copies of Aiden, each one moving a little wrong, each one trying to confuse his eye and break his rhythm. Myra, hidden in the control room below, fought to keep the arena from locking shut around the crowd. Drake, now cornered by the scale of what he had helped build, hesitated for the first time. He had wanted power, but now he saw something worse than losing it. He saw that he had helped hand the city to a force that did not care about the city at all. Aiden looked at him, and for one brief moment, the hate in Aiden faded into something colder and harder. He told Drake that being afraid had never made him strong, it had only made him useful. The final clash shook the whole arena. Aiden shattered the false shadow copies by freezing the air around them, then forcing them to break apart as the motion returned all at once. The wraith tried to trap him with a veil of darkness, but the living frost engine responded to Aiden's heartbeat and widened its cold into a bright storm. For the first time since his exile, Aiden did not fight like a man desperate to prove himself. He fought like a guardian who had finally decided what he protected. He protected the city, but he also protected the truth. The wraith faltered when Aiden reached into the shadow it had used for years and pulled it free from the floor lights of the arena. That shadow was not a simple darkness. It was a stolen tether built from old records, old fear, and the memory of Aiden's disgrace. When Aiden shattered the tether, the wraith recoiled, and the false control it held over the arena began to collapse. Drake and Victor were forced back by the sudden failure of the system they had helped build. Guards who had come to arrest Aiden instead saw the hidden evidence on the arena screens, where Myra had rerouted the old records into public view. The truth spread fast through the crowd, and the city, which had long been trapped in lies, finally began to wake up. Aiden stood in the center of the broken arena, breathing hard, frost fading from his hands, while the masked wraith vanished into a deep gap of shadow before anyone could catch it. He had won the battle, but not the whole war. He was no longer a broken exile, yet he was not free either. He had uncovered the hand behind the betrayal, and now he knew that the shadow moving against him was only just beginning to show its true shape. The broken arena still groaned under the wind as dust drifted through the open cracks in its floor. Above it, Halcyon Bay shone with bright towers, white bridges, and cold storm lights, but the city no longer felt safe. People had gathered on the outer walkways in stunned silence, watching the shattered platform and the empty space where the masked wraith had vanished. Aiden stood in the center of the damage, a tall man with black hair, a dark weathered coat, and frost blue lines glowing faintly across his Sky Guardian armor. His face stayed calm, but his sharp eyes moved carefully because he understood the truth now. The battle inside the arena had been only a test, and the real fight was still waiting in the shadows. Myra hurried toward him through the broken panels, her brown hair tied back, her engineer coat stained with grease, and her boots slipping on the dust. She was a woman with quick eyes and a careful mind, and she wanted the same thing Aiden wanted now, which was the truth. Captain Drake stood farther back with his gray hair cut short, his heavy gloves clenched, and his stern face hard as stone. He wanted order, but he also wanted control, and that made him dangerous in a different way. Victor was not in the arena, yet his presence still hung over everything, because the silver-haired council man in the black coat had helped build the lies that trapped Aiden for so long. The central problem was clear now. Someone had used the living Frost engine, the ancient core in Aiden's hand, to set this betrayal in motion. And if that secret stayed hidden, Halcyon Bay could be turned into a weapon that crushed anyone who resisted. Myra reached Aiden first, and she did not waste time with fear or praise. She looked at the glowing frost core in his hand, then at the broken arena walls, and she said the city's shield network had reacted to the same cold pulse that had shaken the arena. That mattered because Myra understood machines better than anyone in the lower decks, and she knew the Frost engine was not just a power source. It was a living core, ancient and aware, built to respond to touch, command, and emotion. If the wrong person learned how to force it open, then its freezing pulse could stop gears, lock bridges, and seal whole sections of the city in place. Aiden listened without interrupting because he had learned that Myra always noticed details others missed. She explained that during the clash, she had seen hidden signal lines under the arena floor, thin metal veins that carried commands from somewhere above the public levels. That meant the battle had been guided from inside the city, not from outside it. Aiden finally answered in a low, even voice, and he said the masked wraith had not come to win the duel. It had come to check whether he was still under their control. That simple truth made Myra go still. She had expected a trap, but now she understood the size of it. Someone had been watching Aiden for a long time, waiting for the moment when the lies around him began to break. Before she could ask more, Captain Drake approached in measured steps, his red rank markings catching the cold light. He looked at Aiden with a hard stare, then at Myra, and finally at the damaged floor. He wanted to seize the Frost engine at once, not out of greed, but out of fear. He believed the core was too dangerous to remain in civilian hands, and he had spent his whole life trusting command above all else. When he ordered Aiden to surrender the device, Aiden did not move. That silence made the air feel tighter than any shout could have. Drake then admitted something small, but important. He had seen Victor meet with masked messengers in the tower corridors, though he had told himself it was council business. Now he was no longer sure. The first crack in his certainty had appeared, and that crack mattered more than any wound from the battle. Before the three of them could leave the arena, the floor panels shifted with a deep metallic rumble. Hidden gears slid into place, and a narrow access path opened beneath the broken center ring. Myra crouched beside it at once, her fingers already tracing the edges of the mechanism, and she said the arena had a maintenance channel that ran toward the old storm vaults under the plaza. That was not normal access for a public fighting hall, which meant someone had hidden secret routes inside the city long before tonight. Aiden looked down into the dark opening, and the frost engine in his hand gave one soft pulse, almost like a warning. He knew the core was reacting to something beneath them. Drake saw his hesitation and, for the first time, did not speak as a commander. He asked a real question instead. What are we walking into? Aiden answered that the Shadow wanted the engine, and it had already used his exile to keep him isolated. He had been blamed, watched, and cornered because people feared his link to the core. But fear had also protected the truth, because no one looked closely at a broken man who seemed already defeated. That was when the twist began to form clearly for the first time. Myra found a small council seal carved inside one of the maintenance plates, and it was Victor's seal. Not a copied mark, not a rumor. The real seal, hidden where only builders and insiders would ever see it. The secret route had been placed under the arena with Victor's direct approval. He had not merely learned about the trap later. He had helped shape the place where it would be sprung. Drake went rigid because he understood exactly what that meant. If Victor had planned this, then the council was not being guided by reason. It was being guided by a man who wanted panic, because panic made people easier to command. Aiden felt something colder than the frost engine settle in his chest. He had thought the masked wraith was the biggest threat, but now he saw a deeper truth. The wraith was a tool, and Victor was the hand using it. That revelation changed everything. It meant the betrayal was not a single act, it was a system. They moved into the maintenance channel before the city guard could gather around them. The passage was narrow, lined with old pipes, damp metal, and pale utility lamps that flickered with every storm gust above. Myra led the way with quick steps because she could read old mechanisms like a map. Aiden followed with his frost engine held close, and each pulse of the core made cold mist drift over his fingers. Drake brought up the rear, still tense, still proud, but now clearly troubled. As they descended, the noise of the arena faded, and the city became a muffled hum overhead. Myra explained what she had pieced together from the signal lines. The living frost engine had once been part of the first sky shield system in Halcyon Bay. It could freeze motion in a controlled way, which made it perfect for stabilizing storm towers and holding bridges steady during high winds. But the same power could also stop movement in weapons, gates, engines, and defense chains. That was why Victor wanted it. He did not need it to rule by force alone. He needed it to make everyone afraid of what he could stop at any time. Aiden listened, and for the first time since his exile began, he understood how wide the trap really was. His name had been damaged not just to punish him, but to keep him away from the one thing that could expose the city's hidden control system. Then the frost engine warmed slightly in his palm, which was strange for a device tied to ice. A soft voice, barely more than breath, seemed to pass through the core. It was not words, not exactly, but a feeling of direction, like a memory trying to lead him home. Aiden stopped walking. The others turned to him. He realized the core was not only reacting to danger, it was trying to show him something. Myra noticed his change at once and asked what he had felt. Aiden said the engine recognized the old route, and it was pointing them toward the storm vault beneath the council tower. Drake frowned because that was the most guarded place in the city. Then he made his second important choice. He did not call for arrest. He did not order retreat. He simply said, if Victor is hiding something there, then we need proof before dawn. That was no longer blind obedience. That was the start of a new kind of courage. They reached a grated window that looked out across the lower cloud line, and there, through the mist, the storm vault tower rose like a dark spear under the bright city lights. Aiden stood still and studied it, his calm face unchanged, but his mind working quickly. He was no longer the exile who only endured pain. He was beginning to think like a protector again. Myra checked her tools, then looked up at him with cautious trust. Drake rested one heavy glove on the railing and said nothing for a long moment because he was finally seeing the city through broken eyes. Above them, Halcyon Bay still glittered, but now that shine looked fragile, almost like glass over a crack. Somewhere inside that tower, Victor was moving pieces into place, and somewhere deeper, the masked wraith was likely reporting back to him. Aiden understood that the next step would not be another arena fight. It would be a search for proof, a race against silence, and a choice that could break his old life for good. He tightened his grip on the living frost engine, and the pale blue light caught in his black hair and on the steel of his armor. The cold was steady now, not wild. It felt like a promise. He told Myra and Drake that the truth was close, but it would not stay hidden for long. Drake gave one sharp nod. Myra answered with a small, determined breath. Then the three of them turned toward the tower, knowing the shadow was waiting, knowing Victor had already begun to move, and knowing that the next part of the hunt would cut far deeper than the broken arena ever could. Yet before they could take the first step, the frost engine pulsed again, harder this time, and a hidden door in the wall slowly unlocked beside them. Whatever waited beyond it had been sealed for a very long time, and now it was opening. The hidden door opened with a long, heavy groan, and cold air spilled out first, thin and sharp like breath from a sealed winter room. Aiden stood still with the living frost engine in his hand, his black hair falling over one eye, his calm face tightened by warning, while Myra, the brown-haired engineer in her grease-stained coat, leaned forward with quick and careful eyes. Captain Drake, the gray-haired commander in dark armor, kept one steel-gloved hand near his side and stared into the opening as if he expected a trap to leap out and meet them. They had come to the edge of the tower expecting a fight above, but this new opening under the wall made the danger feel older, deeper, and far more planned. Victor was already moving somewhere inside the council tower, and the shadow that waited ahead could be tied to him in ways none of them yet understood. If they failed here, the storm shield network might break, the city bridges could lose their balance, and Halcyon Bay could fall into panic high above the clouds. Myra was the first to speak because she could never stay silent when machines were involved, even when fear pressed close. She pointed at the edge of the door and saw old locking rings, buried signal lines, and frozen dust around the frame. She understood what that meant at once. This was not a random passage, and it was not made for public use. It was a hidden service route, built long ago to keep the most important systems of the city out of sight. Drake frowned and said the council had denied any chamber under the arena, which meant the council had either lied or someone inside it had hidden the truth from every officer in the city. Aiden did not answer right away. He watched the frost engine pulse in his hand, pale blue light moving through its crystal veins like a living pulse. He had been exiled for carrying that engine, and he had been hunted for it, but now it was opening sealed walls as if it remembered the city better than anyone else did. That thought made him uneasy because the engine no longer felt like a tool alone. It felt like a key with a will of its own. They stepped inside one by one, and the door shut behind them with a soft but final seal. The air changed at once. It was colder, drier, and full of old metal, pale utility lights, and quiet pipe hums that had slept for years. The hidden hall belonged to the Halcyon Bay Storm Vault, a place made to guard power routes, control lines, and emergency systems that kept the city floating above the clouds. Long sealed maintenance doors lined the walls, each one marked with faded numbers and old warnings. Myra moved ahead with one hand on the wall, reading the lines and the stains like a map. She said the vault was built to control storm relays if the city was ever damaged, but no one should have been able to enter it from the arena side. That meant someone had rerouted the city long ago, and the hidden door had been waiting for the right signal. Drake called this proof of a deeper conspiracy, and his stern face grew harder as he said Victor would use any secret if it gave him power. Aiden listened, but his attention kept drifting to the engine because its pulse had become stronger, and every beat seemed to echo through the metal walls around them. Then the shadow appeared at the end of the hall. It did not rush them, and it did not make a sound. It only stood there, tall and narrow, wrapped in a long dark robe with a pale inner lining, its smooth white mask hiding everything human and leaving no mouth to read. The dark gloves seemed to drink the light from the hallway. Myra stepped back at once, and Drake raised his guard with a hard breath. Aiden felt the engine in his hand grow colder, as if it recognized the figure before him. The masked wraith tilted its head just slightly, and in that motion there was warning, not attack. It lifted one hand and pointed toward the vault doors deeper inside, then toward the ceiling, where faint red lights blinked behind grated panels. Myra understood first. These were signal locks tied to the storm shield network, and if they were triggered wrong, the whole district could lock down or surge into failure. The wraith was not guarding the room for Victor. It was warning them that someone else had already set a trap for both sides. That was the first twist, and it changed the shape of the danger in an instant. Aiden took one slow step forward, and the living engine answered with a stronger pulse. A ring of pale frost spread over the floor, not breaking anything, but freezing a strip of thin rotating wires that had been hidden under dust. Myra saw the lines and swallowed hard because the vault was not empty at all. It was wired to react to the engine itself. That meant the engine had once belonged here, or it had been built to control something in this room. Drake turned to Aiden and asked the only question that mattered. Why had the council wanted him exiled for carrying an object that clearly opened sealed city systems? Aiden had no answer yet, but the question hit him like a door opening inside his own mind. He remembered the council guards, the rush of his arrest, the cold order that sent him away, and the way Victor had watched from behind polished glass without surprise. Victor had never been confused about the engine. He had always known what it could do. He only needed Aiden away from the truth until the right moment. The hall split into 3 paths ahead, and each one carried a different kind of threat. The left path led down to a power chamber with low hums and cracked pipes. The center path went toward the storm relays, where the city control lines likely ran. The right path vanished into darkness behind a sealed gate marked with old council symbols. Myra wanted the center path because she said the relay room would tell them who was changing the storm settings. Drake wanted the left path because it might hold a manual control panel and a way to stop a citywide lock. Aiden looked at the right path and felt the engine throb once more, as if it was calling him there. He chose the right path, and both of them trusted him, though neither liked the risk. They moved quickly, keeping close to the wall, while the masked wraith stayed behind a few steps, watching with unreadable stillness before following at a distance. The silence felt wrong now because it carried the sense that every choice mattered more than they expected. Somewhere far above them, Victor was making his next move, and the next move could decide who controlled the Sky City by dawn. The sealed gate opened when the frost engine touched its center plate. Inside was a narrow chamber with glass tubes, dormant gears, and a wide console covered in dust. In the middle stood a black frame holding an old city record crystal, and Myra gasped when she saw the council seal stamped into its base. Drake ordered her to stay alert while he scanned the room, and Aiden approached the crystal with careful steps. The engine pulsed faster, and a pale map lit up across the floor. It showed Halcyon Bay, the arena, the council tower, the storm towers, and hidden routes beneath all of them. Then the map shifted, and a second layer appeared under the first. It showed that the storm shield network did not simply protect the city. It also locked away something beneath it, something large, something named only as the Heart Vault. Myra whispered that no public record had ever mentioned such a place, which meant the city had been built over a secret older than the current council. That was the second twist, and it struck them all at once. The city was not just in danger from attack. It was standing on top of a buried system that someone had kept hidden for control. Before anyone could speak again, the console flashed red, and a voice came through the old chamber speakers with cold, clear calm. It was Victor. He sounded close, though he was somewhere far above in the council tower. He said the council had only one duty, and that was to keep the city stable no matter what the people believed they deserved to know. He said the engine was never meant for Aiden, and that Aiden had been carrying a lock meant to be opened by the right bloodline or by the wrong hand at the worst possible time. He did not laugh, but his tone carried the same danger. Then he spoke the truth that made Myra freeze and Drake go rigid. The engine had been built to freeze the highest control lines of the Storm Shield network, not to protect the city, but to stop one person from taking full command of it. Victor wanted it because the network still obeyed the engine in the old emergency code. If he gained it, he could force the storm towers, lock the bridges, and isolate every district under his rule. He was not chasing chaos. He was chasing complete control. The masked wraith moved for the first time in a sudden blur, crossing the chamber and slamming one gloved hand onto the console. The red warning light stopped for one breath, and the floor map flickered. Myra shouted that the wraith had just bought them a small window, maybe only minutes, before the vault sealed again. Drake moved to the door and braced it open with his armored shoulder, calling for Aiden to take the crystal data and move. Aiden pulled the record crystal free, and the frost engine flashed so bright that the whole chamber washed in pale blue light. In that flash, he saw a new image inside the crystal, a memory or warning locked in the city records. It showed Victor standing beside the council chamber long ago, not as a ruler, but as a man speaking to someone hidden in shadow. That hidden figure wore the same white mask. The truth hit Aiden hard. Victor and the masked wraith were connected, and the wraith had not appeared by chance. It had been waiting for Aiden, but maybe also waiting for Victor. Nobody spoke for a moment because the room itself seemed to hold its breath. Then the vault began to shake. Not from an explosion and not from a battle, but from a great distant system waking up. Somewhere above them, the storm towers answered the engine pulse, and the network around Halcyon Bay started to shift. The hidden doors along the hall sealed halfway, then stopped as if another force had interrupted them. Myra grabbed the map data and said they now had proof that the city had a buried control core, a hidden heart vault, and a council lie that reached back many years. Drake looked at Aiden and said this was no longer about exile or pride. It was about who would hold the city steady when the storm came apart. Aiden nodded once, small and firm, because he felt the weight of that truth settle into him at last. He had wanted to survive long enough to clear his name, but now he saw that surviving was not enough. He had to protect the city that had cast him out, because if Victor gained control, every bridge, tower, and home in Halcyon Bay would become a cage. The masked wraith stepped back into the dark as another alarm pulsed through the vault, and its pale mask turned once toward Aiden before vanishing behind a moving wall. That final glance felt like a promise or a warning, and Aiden could not tell which. Myra said they should follow before the vault locked completely, but Drake stopped her and pointed to the far end of the chamber. Another maintenance stair had opened, leading upward toward the council tower. Victor wanted them pushed into the dark below, but the city itself was now giving them a path toward him. Aiden tightened his grip on the living frost engine, feeling its cold pulse match his own steady breath. He did not trust the council, and he did not trust the shadow yet, but he now understood the shape of the hunt. The enemy was not only in front of them. It was above them, inside the council, and maybe even inside the old design of the city itself. So they turned toward the stairway, carrying the stolen crystal, carrying the truth, and carrying the first real chance to answer Victor before he could seal the whole sky shut. And as they climbed, the far-off storm lights of Halcyon Bay began to dim one by one. The stairway inside Halcyon Bay was narrow, cold, and built for people who did not want to be seen. White stone walls pressed close on both sides, and pale light strips glowed under a thin coat of dust. Aiden moved first, tall and silent, his black hair falling over a calm face that never showed fear. He carried the living frost engine in one hand, and the small device breathed out pale blue mist with every pulse, like a heart made of winter. Behind him came Myra, a slim young woman with brown hair tied back tight, her grease-stained engineer coat hanging open over utility straps and dark work boots. She had sharp eyes, a fast mind, and a habit of checking every corner before she trusted it. Last came Captain Drake, a broad man with gray hair and stern features, his dark Sky Guardian armor heavy with steel gloves and red rank marks. He did not like plans that depended on luck, but he did like clear enemies, and Victor had become the clearest enemy of his life. Above them, the city lights were dimming one by one, and that was the first sign that the enemy was already moving. Victor wanted the storm shield network sealed, because if the city lost control of its own wind towers, then the council could decide who could fly, who could leave, and who could even survive the next storm. That was the real stake now, and Aiden understood it in a way he had not before. This was not only a fight for a crystal, it was a fight for the right of the whole city to breathe. They climbed fast, and the stairway opened into a service corridor that ran behind the public levels of the council tower. The walls changed there, from plain stone to dark metal ribs and glass windows that looked out into the cloud sea far below. Through those windows, Halcyon Bay spread like a broken crown, with bridges, towers, and the floating arena rising from the center like a blade. Another storm light went dark in the distance, and then another, and Myra stopped long enough to stare. She was not afraid of darkness itself. She was afraid of patterns, because patterns meant planning. "He is shutting down the network from the inside," she said, her voice low and steady. "He wants the city calm before the final lock takes hold." Drake grunted, but he did not argue because the facts were too clear to deny. Aiden held the frost engine closer, and the pale glow pushed against the shadows in a thin circle. It was not just cold, it was responsive. When he turned it toward the nearest wall panel, the crystal veins inside it brightened as if they had noticed a hidden current. Myra saw that change at once. She knelt, opened a maintenance hatch, and found old signal lines packed into the wall like veins under skin. "The city was built to hide its own bones," she whispered. "Someone wanted control to be easier than honesty." Then the answer came with ugly speed. A red warning pulse flashed through the corridor, and a sealed door ahead slid shut with a heavy metallic slam. From the far end of the hall came the sound of boots, many of them marching with purpose. Security guards were coming, but not to protect them. Victor had already turned the council against the truth, and now every official lock in the tower was treating Aiden as an intruder. Drake stepped in front at once, his steel gloves raised and his stern stare hardened into command. "Move to the side," he said. "I will hold them." Aiden shook his head once. He had learned enough by now to know that standing alone was how people got crushed. Instead, he pressed the frost engine against the wall panel, and the pale blue light spread through the hidden lines like ice finding water. The nearest door froze in place before it could finish locking, and Myra grabbed the release lever with both hands. The seal broke open with a sharp crack, and they slipped through just as the first guards reached the corridor behind them. The passage beyond led down into the old storm vault, the secret chamber beneath the city that few people even knew existed. The ceiling was low there, lined with dark metal pipes, pale utility lamps, and sealed maintenance doors that looked older than the tower above them. The air smelled of damp stone and machine oil, and every step echoed as if the room itself remembered secrets. Myra looked around with growing anger because she could see how the vault worked, and she could see how easy it had been to hide lies inside it. There were power routes leading toward the storm towers, and there were control sockets that could freeze entire sections of the storm shield network if the right core was inserted. That was the reason Victor wanted the living frost engine so badly. He did not want to destroy the city. He wanted to own the city by holding its weather in his hands. Aiden finally said the part he had been holding back. He said the sky must be sealed to save us. His voice was quiet, but the words landed hard in the room. Drake looked at him, then at the glowing engine, and the old soldier in him understood the shape of the lie. "Men like Victor always call control a rescue," he said. "It makes the chain sound like a shield." Myra opened one of the older terminals in the vault, and her fingers moved fast across worn switches and hanging wires. She found records, old ones hidden under layers of false updates. They showed emergency plans, storm collapse maps, and one clear note repeated in different forms. The council had once used the storm shield network to protect the public, but Victor and a few others had later altered the system to give themselves private control over access, movement, and power. Aiden felt the truth settle inside him like a stone. This was why the city had felt wrong for so long. The design itself had been bent. That meant the enemy was not only a person. It was a structure of fear that had been built layer by layer. Then Myra froze. She had found one more file, and her face changed as she read it. "Aiden," she said, sounding careful now, "the frost engine was not stolen from a vault. It was hidden here by someone who expected Victor to come for it." Drake stepped closer. "Who?" he asked. Myra swallowed once. "Your name is on the record." The room went still. Aiden stared at the screen, and for one long moment, even the machine noise seemed to fade. The record was old but clear. It showed that Aiden had once been listed as part of a secret maintenance unit that studied the living frost engine before his exile, and that he had signed the warning order himself when he was younger. He had not been a traitor, he had been a witness and then a barrier. He had tried to keep Victor away from the engine years ago, and that refusal had helped lead to his removal from the city. The truth hit him harder than any attack because it explained the silence around his past. He had not merely lost his place. He had been pushed out to keep the city from learning what he knew. Drake looked at him with a new level of respect, and Myra did too, because now his calm was not coldness. It was discipline built from pain. "Then he feared you," Drake said. "That means you matter more than he wanted." Before Aiden could answer, the vault lights flickered and a shadow crossed the doorway. The masked wraith had arrived. It stood at the edge of the light in a long dark robe with a pale inner lining, its white mask blank and empty, its dark gloves swallowing every reflection. No one could tell its gender, and that made it even more unsettling because it felt less like a person and more like a decision made by darkness. It did not speak. It only raised one hand, and the temperature in the room dropped fast. The hidden pipes froze along their seams, and the maintenance lamps dimmed into a weak blue haze. Myra stepped back at once, while Drake shifted into a fighting stance. Aiden felt the frost engine stir in his hand, almost recognizing the same cold force in the room. Then the wraith moved with sudden speed, not rushing forward but pulling the shadow itself along the walls. It was not here to kill them. It was here to take the engine, and that was somehow worse because it meant someone else still needed the city sealed. Aiden understood the danger in a new way. Victor was not alone. Someone inside the city wanted the same lock, but for a reason no one had named yet. The wraith struck the floor with one gloved hand, and a wave of dark frost rolled toward them, forcing Drake and Myra back as the vault doors began to slam shut around the chamber. Aiden lifted the frost engine and its pale pulse answered him at last. The engine brightened, the mist around it spun in a tight ring, and the frozen waves stalled in place for one breath. Then the whole vault shook above them, and a distant alarm began to ring through the tower. Victor had made his next move, and the city was running out of time. Aiden held the light steady, Drake braced for the next clash, and Myra shouted that the path to the floating arena was still open for only a few moments more. They could escape into the city, but they would have to cross the arena while the storm shield network failed around them. Above the vault, more lights dimmed across Halcyon Bay, and the sky itself seemed to hold its breath. The alarm kept ringing through the tower, and its sharp sound made every metal wall feel thinner. Below the council tower, Halcyon Bay glowed with weak, scattered lights, and the bright floating city looked tired for the first time in its life. Wind moved through the open service shafts, carrying cold mist from the storm lines and the faint tremble of failing power. Aiden stood in the center of the storm vault with his black hair falling over one eye, his tall, lean body still and ready, and the pale blue frost engine shining in his hand like a tiny living heart. Captain Drake, a man with gray hair and a muscular frame, turned his heavy steel gloves toward the nearest door, his stern face hard as stone. Myra, a woman with brown hair and a slim workman build, grabbed her utility straps and looked from one tunnel to another, because she knew the path to the floating arena would close very soon. Victor had made his move, and everyone in the vault understood the same truth at once. If they stayed, the city might lock down around them. If they ran too late, the storm shield network would fail, the bridges would lose balance, and thousands of people would be left at the mercy of the open sky. The danger was no longer hidden. It was now in the air, in the walls, and in the fear on every face. Myra pointed toward the slanted maintenance hallway and spoke fast because she knew every second mattered. She was the city engineer who had spent years repairing power routes no one else bothered to learn, and she wanted only one thing now: to keep the city from falling into Victor's hands. She explained that the floating arena still had a live route under its outer ring, but the route would seal as soon as the next relay failed. Drake snapped that they should move now, not after another argument, because he was a commander who trusted action more than warnings. His cold stare never left the dark tunnel, and his rigid confidence made it clear that he would protect the others as long as his strength held. Aiden did not speak at first. He watched the frost engine pulse in his palm and felt its strange, living cold answer the alarm in the tower. He had been exiled once because people feared what he carried, and that pain had made him careful, silent, and hard to break. Yet this moment was different. The city was not just a place on the map. It was home to people who could not defend themselves if Victor succeeded. Victor, with his silver hair, polished face, and elegant black council coat, wanted control over the Storm Shield network because he believed fear was the only thing that could keep the city united. He thought the people of Halcyon Bay were weak, and he wanted the network in his hands so he could force order through pressure and disaster. That cruel logic made him more dangerous because he never saw himself as a thief. He saw himself as a ruler who was willing to break the city to save it. They moved out together. Drake led the way through the maintenance hall, his boots striking the floor in short, hard steps. Myra stayed close behind him, using her small hand light to check the signal lines that ran along the wall. Aiden followed with the frost engine cupped carefully in both hands and the pale glow painted blue lines across his armor. The tunnel bent downward, then opened into a wide support chamber where old pipes ran above their heads and emergency strips flashed red. Somewhere above them, the storm shield network groaned, and the whole city gave a low, uneasy hum. That sound became worse as they neared the outer route to the floating arena. Half the lights in the chamber dimmed, then one side of the floor shivered as if the city itself had taken a deep breath and almost lost it. Then the masked wraith appeared from the shadow between two pillars. The figure was tall and narrow, wrapped in a dark robe with a pale inner lining, and the smooth white mask had no mouth at all. Dark gloves covered the hands, and those gloves seemed to swallow every bit of light around them. Myra stepped back in alarm, and Drake lifted one glove like he expected a fight, but the wraith only pointed to a side panel hidden behind the pipes. The gesture was calm, exact, and strangely helpful. Aiden studied the figure and realized something important. The wraith was not here to attack them. It was here because Victor had opened something far worse than a simple shutdown. The wraith placed one gloved hand against the panel, and a hidden screen lit up with the city power map. Several storm towers were already marked in red. One tower was failing, then a second. The wraith tapped the map again, and Myra sucked in a sharp breath. Victor was not just draining the system. he was redirecting the storm shield current toward the floating arena. He wanted to turn the arena into a trap, then force every defender into a single place where he could control the outcome. That was the twist that changed everything. Myra had thought the arena route was their escape, but Victor had turned it into a cage. Drake cursed under his breath and slammed one steel glove against the wall, while Aiden tightened his grip on the frost engine until cold mist slipped between his fingers. The wraith then moved to the floor hatch and pressed a hidden code into the old lock. The hatch opened with a heavy metallic sigh, revealing a narrow passage under the city frame that ran below the arena support ring. The wraith did not speak, but its body language made one thing clear. It knew a secret route that Victor had forgotten or perhaps never found. Myra stared at the figure and asked the only question that mattered. Could they trust it? The answer came through action. The wraith stepped first into the passage, showing no fear, no hesitation, and no sign of betrayal. Drake gave a single hard nod, because trust in war often began with speed, not certainty. They followed. The tunnel sloped out beneath the city, and through the open edge they could see Halcyon Bay suspended above the clouds, with bridges glowing like thin threads and tower tops fading in and out as the shield power collapsed. More lights went dark across the skyline. The floating arena waited ahead, a massive circle of stone and metal panels that turned slowly in the wind. It looked empty from a distance, but its moving walls and hidden gears kept shifting, as if the city itself had turned into a machine built for combat. Aiden felt the frost engine pulse faster, and he understood that it was responding to the damage in the storm lines. The device was alive, and it wanted to freeze motion whenever danger pushed too close. That power might be the only thing that could save them, or the final thing that could break the city if used wrong. When they stepped onto the arena ring, the world changed at once. Wind hit them hard, and the wide platform trembled under their feet as the outer panels shifted into a new path. The city stretched around them on all sides, bright below and dark above, while distant alarm lights flashed from the council tower. A voice came through hidden speakers across the arena, smooth, cold, and full of quiet control. It was Victor. He spoke as if he were speaking to the entire city, not just to them. He said the storm shield network had failed because the old system was weak, and weak systems should be replaced before they destroyed everyone who depended on them. He said the city needed one hand on the controls, one mind to make the hard choices, and one order strong enough to stop chaos. Then he offered a warning that sounded almost polite. If Aiden and Drake resisted, the remaining storm towers would collapse in sequence, and the bridges would become too unstable for rescue teams to cross. Myra looked up in horror because she knew Victor was not bluffing. He had built his plan on city logic, and city logic was easy to understand. Break the power routes, frighten the people, and make them beg for control. Drake answered by raising his glove and shouting that Victor had turned fear into a weapon because he had nothing honest left to offer. The arena walls then moved with a heavy grinding sound, sealing exits on 3 sides. Dark mechanical arms slid out from the floor, and blue crackling lines ran over the metal like trapped lightning. The fight was not for victory alone anymore. It was for every person in the city who still believed the lights would stay on. Aiden moved first because the frost engine in his hand suddenly grew colder and brighter. He stepped forward, held the device toward the nearest moving wall, and the air in front of him froze into a pale sheet that slowed the spinning gears. Drake used the moment to rush the side platform, his heavy steel gloves striking the metal with sharp, controlled force, driving back one blocking arm long enough for Myra to slide beneath it. She reached a control box built into the arena floor and began working the switches with fast, careful hands, while shouting that she could reroute one storm line if she had 30 seconds more. The masked wraith moved beside her, silent and precise, and used one dark glove to absorb a burst of stray energy from the cracked panel. For the first time, Aiden saw the wraith as more than a mystery. It was a protector shaped by secrecy, maybe once tied to the same council that now betrayed the city. Yet there was no time to ask. Another section of the arena lifted, and Victor finally revealed himself on a control balcony high above the ring. His silver hair caught the emergency light, and his smooth smile looked calm even now. He was surrounded by guards, but he did not seem afraid of the fight below. He wanted Aiden to see that the city could be governed only by someone willing to make everyone else feel small. Aiden looked up at him and felt something change inside his chest. Exile had made him cautious, but it had also taught him what Victor did not understand. A city was not a machine to be forced. It was people, and people could choose each other. With that thought, Aiden pushed the frost engine harder than before. The living core answered with a bright cold pulse, and a wide ring of freezing mist spread across the arena floor, locking the nearest gears in place just long enough for Drake to break the path open. Myra shouted that the line was working, and the storm shield network began to answer her from across the city. For one shining moment, hope returned. But then the floor beneath Victor split open with a heavy warning crack, and the upper towers flashed red again. Something deeper in the city had been triggered, something Victor had hidden even from his own people. The arena rocked, the wind screamed through the open ring, and the masked wraith turned sharply toward the broken control line as if it had recognized the real threat at last. Aiden felt the frost engine pulse once more, harder than before, as the next danger began to rise from below. The arena shook again, and the broken floor under Victor groaned like it was about to give up. Red light flashed across the upper towers of Halcyon Bay, and the whole floating city felt sick with fear. Below the arena, deep inside the hidden stone and metal of the city, something long buried had finally started to wake. Aiden stood in the cold wind with the living frost engine glowing in his hand, and he could feel its pulse answering the danger below. Victor, with his silver hair and smooth, dangerous smile, kept his balance with calm pride, but his eyes had changed. He had not expected this moment to come so soon, and that made him more dangerous, not less. Captain Drake, broad-shouldered and hard-faced in his dark armor, looked down through the crack with a stern stare that hid real worry. He wanted control, and he wanted to keep the city safe, but he also feared what Victor had hidden from everyone. Myra, with brown hair tied back under her grease-stained coat, moved near a bent control rail with quick hands and a sharp mind. She wanted answers, and she knew that if she did not find them now, the storm shield network could fail across the entire city. Above them all, the masked wraith turned toward the broken control line in silence, its white mask blank and cruel, as if it had finally found the real target of its hunt. No one on the arena could yet say why it was there, but its stillness made one thing clear. It did not care about victory. It cared about what Victor had hidden beneath the city. Victor raised one gloved hand, and his voice carried cleanly through the screaming wind. He told everyone to stay back, but his words sounded less like a warning and more like a command meant to protect his own secret. He had spent years building his power inside the council tower, using polished speeches and formal smiles to make himself look like the city could trust him. In truth, he had been guarding the lower systems of Halcyon Bay because he believed the city would fall apart if the truth ever came out. He had discovered the hidden chamber called the Storm Vault long ago, and inside it he had found an old control system tied to the Storm Shield network. That system had been made to freeze the city from the inside, locking the storm towers, the bridge rails, and even the arena itself whenever the city faced a great threat. Victor had not destroyed it because he wanted that power for himself. He had kept it in secret because a city that depended on fear was easier to rule than a city that understood the truth. Aiden understood enough of this now to feel sick with anger. The living frost engine in his hand was not just a weapon. It was part of that old city system, and Victor had been using it like a key to open the frozen heart of Halcyon Bay. Myra shouted that the control lines were failing fast and that the lower vault was pulling power from the entire network. Captain Drake cursed under his breath and ordered a retreat from the cracked section of the arena, but there was nowhere safe to go. The rotating panels of the battlefield shifted with a heavy grind, opening one path and sealing another. Wind poured through the gaps and shoved everyone apart. Then the floor under the broken line split wider, and a thin column of pale mist rose from below like a breath from an underground beast. The masked wraith moved first. It crossed the broken stone with a glide so smooth it almost seemed to float, and its dark gloves reached toward the exposed control line. Aiden saw the wraith freeze for the smallest instant, as if it had recognized the same pattern he had just felt in the engine. This was not random. The wraith knew the old system. It knew what Victor had done. Then the wraith struck the line with a sharp motion, not to break it, but to stop it from locking fully. That single choice changed the whole fight. Aiden realized the wraith was trying to keep the lower chamber from sealing shut, which meant there was something down there that mattered even more than the chaos in the arena. Victor saw the move too, and for the first time his perfect face lost a little of its calm. He snapped an order at the security guards in the upper ring, but many of them were already being thrown into confusion by the red lights and the shaking walls. Drake looked from Victor to the Wraith and then to Aiden, and he seemed to understand that the city had become bigger than any one order. He took a hard breath and told Myra to find the manual control switch for the arena lifts. Myra nodded once and ran along the edge of the cracked platform, using her boots, her tools, and her sharp eyes to search for any panel still working. She knew the city systems better than anyone in the arena, and she knew Victor had never wanted people like her to know too much. Aiden stepped forward, the frost engine pulsing faster now, and he felt its cold spread up his arm. The pale blue crystal veins brightened and a thin ring of ice formed in the air around his fingers. He did not activate it fully. He was learning. The engine responded not just to force, but to choice. It waited for the right command, and that made it feel less like a tool and more like a living thing that wanted to be understood. Another shock ran through the arena, and this one came from below, not above. A deep metallic thud echoed up through the broken floor, followed by a long hum that made every loose piece of metal tremble. The hidden chamber under Halcyon Bay was waking in full. The storm vault had opened enough to send power through the old roots, and the storm shield network began to twist out of balance. Across the skyline, wind rails flickered, and far away, the bridge lights between the towers dimmed in waves. That meant the city was already slipping into danger. If the shield network failed, the floating platforms could drift apart, the sky bridges could lock, and the lower service levels could freeze in place with no warning. People in the city below would be trapped, and the upper districts could lose all power control at once. Aiden understood the stakes at last. This was not only a duel, it was a test of whether Halcyon Bay could survive its own secrets. Victor finally spoke again, and this time his voice had a sharp edge under the calm. He said the frost engine belonged in his hands because he had been the one to keep the city alive. He said the old vault system was too unstable, and that if anyone forced it open, the entire shield network could collapse. He was not lying completely, which made him worse. He truly believed that only his control could prevent disaster, but his fear had turned into greed, and his greed had turned the city into a cage. Aiden stared at him and understood the simple truth hidden under all the layers. Victor had not been protecting Halcyon Bay, he had been protecting his right to rule it. Then the floor near the cracked opening burst outward in a spray of broken metal plates and cold vapor, and a narrow stairwell of black stone appeared below. From that gap came a louder pulse of blue light, much older than the arena lights and much colder than the storm towers. Myra reached the manual panel at last and slammed her palm against it. One section of the arena wall unlocked with a hard click, and a descending bridge began to unfold toward the opening. Drake moved to guard her, planting himself between her and the nearest guards, while the Wraith stood at the edge of the dark stairwell like a silent watcher from another world. Victor looked down into the opening, and for a moment his polished smile was gone. What he saw there shook him more than any enemy blade could have. Because below the arena, deep in the storm vault, someone had left a second frost core tied into the city power roots, and that core had the same crystal pattern as the living frost engine in Aiden's hand. Before anyone could speak, the hidden core sent out one cold, bright pulse, and every lamp in the arena flickered at once. Aiden felt his engine answer in perfect match, as if the two pieces had finally found each other after a very long time. He took one step toward the opening, not because he wanted glory, but because he knew the truth now mattered more than fear. Victor reached out as if to stop him. Drake shouted for everyone to hold position, and the Wraith tilted its blank mask toward the stairwell as if listening for a voice only it could hear. Then a deep sound rose from below, low and steady, like a giant machine breathing in the dark. Aiden tightened his grip on the glowing frost engine and stared into the opening, knowing the next answer was waiting under the city, and knowing that whatever came next would change everything again. The stairwell under Halcyon Bay opened into a narrow service corridor, and the air changed at once, turning colder, heavier, and far more still. Pale utility lights flickered along dark metal walls, and old pipes crossed overhead like frozen veins. The city above looked clean and bright, but down here everything felt hidden on purpose, as if the whole place had been built to keep a secret from the people who lived under its skies. Aiden stood at the front with the living frost engine pulsing in his hand, its pale blue glow brushing his black hair and the frost blue lines on his armor. He did not speak because the machine sound below had already said enough. It was deep, steady, and massive, and it made the floor hum under his boots. Behind him, Captain Drake, a man with gray hair, a muscular frame, and stern, sharp features, lifted one heavy steel glove and kept his team in line. Victor, with silver hair, a slim build, and that smooth, dangerous smile, stayed close with calm eyes that never stopped measuring the room. Myra, a woman with brown hair, a slim, practical build, and a grease-stained engineer coat, crouched near the wall and studied the old control panels with quick, focused eyes. The masked wraith, tall and narrow under a dark robe with pale lining, stood at the rear and turned its white, featureless mask toward the corridor ahead, as if it could hear the machine breathe through stone. Drake did not like any of this, and everyone could see it. He wanted order, clear lines, and a path he could control, because he believed the city only survived when someone strong held it together. That was why he had followed Aiden into the lower levels instead of blocking him at the stairwell. He knew the living frost engine could freeze motion itself when activated, and if it was forced open in the wrong place, it could disrupt the storm shield network that kept the floating bridges, storm towers, and wind rails steady above the clouds. If that network failed, Halcyon Bay could drift into chaos, and people across the city could be left trapped, cut off, or worse, sent tumbling into the storm winds below. Victor knew all of that too, and he cared for it in a different way. He wanted the network because he wanted control, and he believed strict control was the only way to keep a city like this alive. He did not say that out loud, but his calm face made the truth easy to read. Aiden saw it in the way Victor watched the frost engine, in the way he studied Drake, and in the way he never once looked surprised by the deep machine sound. Then, from somewhere ahead, the wraith slowly raised one gloved hand and pointed to a maintenance door at the end of the hall. It moved with quiet certainty, like someone following a path it had taken before. Myra hurried to the door and brushed dust from the small plate beside it. Her shoulders tightened when she saw the old seal marks. "This is not a normal service line," she said, her voice low and careful. "This is part of the storm vault." Drake looked at her sharply because the name carried weight even for him. The storm vault was supposed to stay hidden, a secret chamber tied to the power roots of the city and never shown to the public. It was where the oldest systems were buried, where repairs could be made without panic, and where dangerous controls could be locked away from careless hands. But Myra found something worse than an old chamber. She found signs that the vault had been used recently. Fresh tool marks cut through the dust, and new cable clamps sat beside old hinges. Someone had been down here before them. Victor stepped closer, his polished face unreadable, and asked the question everyone else feared. Who would come here without permission? Myra looked up at him, then at Drake, then finally at Aiden. "Someone who wants the city to depend on them," she said. "Or someone who wants to hide what really powers the storm shield." That answer landed hard because it gave shape to the fear that had been growing since the first clash in the arena above. The floating arena, with its shifting stone and metal panels, had felt like a battlefield built for public power. This place felt like the private room behind it where the truth lived. The wraith moved first. It glided past the others and pressed one dark glove to the door. For one strange moment, the pale light around its hand dimmed, as if the shadow itself was drinking it. Then the seal clicked and the door opened with a tired metal groan. Everyone froze. Nobody had expected the masked figure to know the lock. Aiden narrowed his eyes, and even Drake shifted his weight as if ready for a trap. The wraith did not react to their tension. It simply stood aside and let the corridor beyond reveal itself. The next chamber was round and deep, lined with old control glass, rotating power rings, and rows of hidden signal lines that ran into the floor. At the center stood a large, dark core frame with broken frost marks around it, and beside it sat a cracked display showing the words Storm Shield Diversion Route. Myra stared at the display and went pale. "This is not just a vault," she whispered. "This is a control junction. Someone can route the whole city through here." Drake turned slowly toward Victor because the reason was becoming clearer and uglier. If one person could route the entire network from below, then they could lock bridges, slow winds, and decide who moved safely through the city and who did not. Victor said nothing, but his smile thinned. Aiden looked from the display to the frost engine in his hand, and for the first time he understood the trap. The frost engine was not only a key, it was also a brake. It could freeze motion in the network long enough to stop a disaster, or long enough to let a person seize control. That was why the deep machine had sounded like breathing. Something below was already awake, and it had been waiting for the frost engine to arrive. Then the twist came and it changed the room. The wraith stepped into the center circle and lifted its mask toward the cracked display, and the old screen lit up with a weak blue pulse. A hidden voice crackled from the speakers, distorted and thin, but still clear enough to make everyone stiffen. "Protocol Warden still active," it said. "Unauthorized return detected." Myra gasped because the voice was not random. It was a stored city record tied to the earliest builders of the Storm Shield network. Drake barked for everyone to stay ready, but Victor finally spoke in a voice that was too calm. "So it is real," he said. "The city was never meant to run on open trust." Aiden turned toward him. "What did you know?" Victor met his eyes and answered with painful honesty. "Enough to know that the Storm Shield was built after a great failure," he said. "Too many people wanted freedom and too many people used it badly. So the founders hid the real controls beneath the city and gave the surface only the parts that made people feel safe." The words hit hard, but the real shock came next, when the Wraith pointed at Aiden and then at the Frost engine. Myra looked between them and suddenly understood the shape of the lie. "You did not find him by accident," she said quietly. "He was brought here because the engine belongs to this system." The room went still. Aiden felt the engine pulse in his hand, and for one breath he thought of all the times he had been told he was in exile, a mistake, a burden, someone who should stay out of the city he had once protected. Now the truth stood in front of him like a blade without a wound. He was not just carrying a relic, he was carrying the lost heart of the Storm Shield. Drake moved first this time, not to attack, but to protect the room from breaking apart. He ordered Myra to check the control ring, ordered 2 guards to hold the side exits, and ordered Victor to stay where he was. Victor obeyed only because he chose to. He lifted both hands a little and let the dangerous smile return, but now it looked strained. He wanted power, yes, but not from simple greed. He wanted it because he believed the city above the clouds was always one mistake away from falling apart, and he would rather control the truth than let the city collapse under fear. That motive did not make him good, but it made him understandable, and that made him more dangerous. Aiden stepped toward the center frame with the Frost engine trembling in his hand. He could feel the pull of the machine below, and he could feel the old rules hidden in the walls. If he forced the engine open now, he might freeze the diversion route and stop whoever was preparing a takeover. But he might also lock the whole Storm Shield in place and leave the city helpless. Myra reached out and stopped just short of his arm. "Do not force it alone," she said. "This system was built with balance in mind. If we rush, we break it." Drake gave a short nod, and for once his rigid face softened by a fraction. "Then we do it clean," he said. "Aiden, on your mark." The Wraith stood silent in the blue glow, like an echo of the past waiting to be forgiven. Aiden looked at each of them, and for the first time since his exile, he did not feel like a man facing a room full of strangers. He felt like someone standing inside a choice that could shape a city. He set the living Frost engine into the center frame, and the chamber answered with a low roar. Blue light rushed through the hidden rings, up the walls, and into the old cables that disappeared beneath the floor. The giant machine below them began to wake fully, and the whole vault shuddered as if the city had taken a deep breath. Panels slid aside, rotating plates turned. New lines lit up across the floor like veins of ice. Myra shouted for everyone to brace, and Drake planted his boots and held the line. Victor stared at the display with real concern now, because he could finally see how close the entire network was to a complete lock. The system was not trying to destroy them. It was asking for a command, one final command, and that command had to come from someone who understood both control and trust. Aiden closed his eyes for 1 second and remembered the sky above the arena, the faces in the city, and the quiet wish that had brought him this far. He did not want power for himself. He wanted a city that could stand without fear. When he opened his eyes, the Frost engine brightened and the chamber filled with a clear blue pulse. The diversion route on the cracked display began to split apart, revealing another path deeper below the city, one no one had yet entered. The Wraith stepped back as if it had expected exactly this, and its blank mask turned toward the dark opening beyond the control room. Drake tightened his glove, Victor narrowed his eyes, and Myra whispered that the route was still open. Aiden stared into the new passage, knowing the answer was still waiting under the city, and knowing the next step would bring them even closer to the truth that had been buried for years. For now, the chamber held, the city above remained steady, and the hidden path called them forward into the dark. The hidden passage breathed cold air into the storm vault control chamber, and the pale lights along the walls flickered like tired eyes. Halcyon Bay still floated high above the clouds, bright and proud, but down here the city felt old, cramped, and secret. The storm vault was full of dark metal, cracked screens, and exposed pipes that ran into the floor like buried veins. Aiden stood at the front with his black hair still damp from the cold mist, his lean body still and ready, the living frost engine glowing softly in his hand. He knew the city above depended on systems like this one, and he knew that if this hidden path failed, the storm shield network could weaken and the whole city could fall into chaos. Captain Drake, a tall man with gray hair, a muscular build, and stern, sharp features, watched the opening with hard eyes and a clenched jaw. He wanted control because control was how he protected people, and because he trusted command more than mystery. Victor, a slim man with silver hair, a polished face, and a smooth, dangerous smile, stood a step behind with calm hands in his formal gloves. He wanted the truth, but he also wanted power, and those two wants were never far apart. Myra, a slim woman with brown hair, an alert young face, and a grease-stained engineer coat, kept her lantern low and studied the passage with quick, careful eyes. She wanted the city to stay alive, and she knew machines better than anyone in the room. Then there was the masked wraith, a tall, narrow figure in a dark robe with a white, mouthless mask and dark gloves that seemed to swallow the light. It had no clear gender, no open face, and no easy trust. It had led them here, and that alone made the silence feel heavy. Aiden spoke first, with a calm voice that carried more weight than fear. He said they were going through because the answer was deeper than the chamber and the city above was already living on borrowed time. Drake did not like that answer, but he did not stop him. Victor only smiled a little, as if the hidden path confirmed something he had suspected for years. Myra checked the route one more time and said the passage was still open, though the signal lines under the floor were trembling in a strange pattern. That mattered because the hidden system was not only a tunnel. It was connected to the city's storm controls, and any wrong move could send power through the network in the wrong way. The masked wraith lifted one dark hand and pointed into the darkness, as if it knew the exact place where the truth was waiting. Then it stepped inside first, and the others followed before doubt could grow roots. The passage narrowed quickly, and the walls pressed close around them. Pipes ran above their heads, slow water dripped somewhere far ahead, and the light from Myra's lantern turned the metal surfaces into long silver strips. Aiden kept one hand around the living frost engine, feeling its faint pulse like a small heart made of winter. Every few steps, the core gave off a thin breath of cold mist, and each breath made the old tunnel frost over for a moment before fading again. Myra noticed it right away and said the engine was reacting to a deeper system. She explained that the frost core was not just a power source. It was a key, and the city below had been built to answer to it long ago. That news made Drake slow his pace and narrow his eyes. He asked why no one had told them that before, and Myra answered that many things in Halcyon Bay had been hidden on purpose. The council in the tower had always claimed the lower chambers were only maintenance space, but the wiring, the locks, and the old signal lines told a different story. Victor listened without interrupting, though his smile vanished for the first time. He knew more than he had said. That became clear when he reached out and touched a wall panel covered in dust, then stopped when he saw a faded emblem stamped into the metal. It was the same mark used on restricted orders from the council tower. Aiden noticed the change in Victor's face and understood something important. Victor was not just following the truth, he had once been close to it. The realization made the air colder than the tunnel. Ahead, the masked wraith paused at a sealed door with a broken hand reader. It turned its smooth white mask back toward them, and for one long second the stillness felt like a warning. Then the figure pressed both dark gloves against the door, and the old lock responded with a low mechanical hum. Myra stepped closer, her brown hair falling across her cheek as she studied the lock pattern. She whispered that the system was waiting for the living frost engine. That meant the city had been designed to open only for this core, and that meant someone had planned for this moment from the beginning. Aiden looked down at the pale blue glow in his hand and felt the weight of that truth. He had carried the core like a burden, but it might have been a key all along. That changed the whole mission. If the engine was a key, then the people who had stolen it years ago had not only taken power, they had hidden a path. Drake did not like secrets, and the idea that the city had been built around one made him angrier with every step. He moved beside Aiden and said the council had betrayed the whole city if this was true. He wanted to force answers from the highest tower, and he wanted to do it now. Aiden did not argue because he knew anger could become useful if it stayed focused, but he also knew anger could break a team apart. That was the problem now. They were not only fighting a hidden system, they were fighting their own doubts. Myra crouched by the sealed door and examined the broken reader, then told them the next chamber was likely a control core linked to the storm shield network. She said if the frost engine was forced into the wrong slot, the whole network could freeze in place and the floating bridges above could lose balance. The stakes were no longer vague. If they failed, the city could lose power across its wind rails and storm towers, and people in Halcyon Bay would be trapped in panic while the defenses collapsed. Victor finally spoke, and his voice was smooth but tight. He said he had seen a chamber like this once before, years ago, when a secret order came down from the council tower. He said the council had not hidden the lower systems to protect the city. They had hidden them to protect a person, or perhaps to protect themselves from what was stored here. Before anyone could ask more, the masked wraith moved again. It slid through the half-open door and into the next room, and the others rushed after it. The chamber beyond was wider than the tunnel and round like a buried wheel, with rotating power rings set into the walls, cracked display panels, and thick hidden signal lines running into the floor. In the center stood a glass cradle, and inside that cradle was a second shape, covered in dust cloth and old seals. Aiden stopped at the sight of it because the shape matched the outline of a human memory. The wraith touched the cloth once, and the room answered with a quiet pulse. Then the seals broke open by themselves. Under the cloth was a council archive capsule, and inside it was a set of records no one was supposed to see. Myra rushed forward and read the first line aloud. It named the living frost engine, the storm shield network, and a private emergency program authorized from the council tower. Drake stared in disbelief. Victor went still. Aiden felt the room tilt inside him because the records did not describe a weapon. They described a lock. The frost engine had been built to keep something else frozen and contained beneath the city. That was the twist that changed everything. The living frost engine was not the source of the city's defense. It was the seal that held a deeper chamber closed. Myra kept reading, and her voice grew quieter with each line. The record said the chamber below had once held the original Storm Heart, a core so powerful that it could stabilize Halcyon Bay or tear its systems apart if handled without care. The council had feared that if the truth spread, rival leaders would try to seize it, and the floating city would become a battlefield. So they had erased the truth, hidden the original chamber, and spread the lie that the lower vaults were only maintenance spaces. Aiden understood then why the masked wraith had led them here. This was not just a guide. It was a keeper of the buried history and maybe a guardian bound to the old seal. Victor took one step toward the archive capsule and asked, very softly, who had placed him on the council task all those years ago. The room answered for him. A second record panel lit up, showing an old authorization trail with his name attached. Victor had not merely been near the secret, he had once helped hide it. His face did not break, but the smooth control on it finally cracked. He said he had thought he was protecting the city. He said he had been young, ambitious, and afraid of a collapse. He had agreed to bury the truth because he believed the Storm Heart would destroy Halcyon Bay if the wrong hands touched it. Drake looked at him with open anger now because that explanation was logical, but it did not erase the harm. Aiden listened, and for the first time he saw Victor as more than a threat. He saw a man trapped inside the choice he had made long ago, yet there was no time to settle that pain because the room began to shake. The power rings on the walls spun faster, and the hidden signal lines flashed with pale blue light. Myra looked up and shouted that the control chamber had just detected the living frost engine. The old system was waking up. The masked wraith stepped back and spread its dark gloves as a low tone filled the chamber, the same tone that had probably been silent for years. A door in the far wall slid open by itself, revealing another staircase going even deeper under the city. Cold air rose from below, sharp and ancient, and with it came a single sound that made everyone freeze in place. It was the sound of a machine turning over after a very long sleep. Aiden tightened his grip on the frost engine, lifted his eyes into the dark stairwell, and felt the weight of the next truth waiting below. Behind him, Drake prepared to move. Myra looked ready to follow the system trail. Victor stared as if he had seen a ghost from his own past, and the masked wraith stood motionless at the edge of the light. The path had not ended. It had only opened wider, and whatever waited beneath Halcyon Bay now knew they had arrived. The stairwell beneath Halcyon Bay was narrow, cold, and silent, and the weak light from above barely reached the first steps below. The city still thundered far overhead, with wind moving across glass bridges and storm towers, but down here the air felt old and trapped, like the walls were holding their breath. Aiden stood at the front with the living frost engine glowing pale blue in his hand, and his black hair fell over his calm face as he stared into the dark below. He was a tall man with a lean build, a dark weathered coat, and layered Sky Guardian armor marked with frost blue lines, and he carried himself like someone who had learned to keep moving even when fear tried to freeze him. Behind him, Captain Drake waited with his heavy steel gloves ready, his gray hair and stern face hard under the dim light. Drake was a muscular man who believed order was the only thing that kept people safe, and that belief had pushed him into more than one dangerous choice. Myra stood a step farther back, a slim woman with brown hair tied for work and a grease-stained engineer coat that had survived too many repairs. She was quick, alert, and careful, and she wanted the system trail below to reveal the truth before anyone could bury it again. Victor watched them all with silver hair, a polished face, and a smooth, dangerous smile, but his eyes had changed the moment he looked into the stairwell, because he had seen something there that touched an old wound. And at the edge of the light stood the masked wraith, a tall figure in a dark robe with pale lining, dark gloves, and a smooth white mask without a mouth. No one knew its gender and no one trusted its purpose, but it had led them this far, and that made it impossible to ignore. The truth was now clear to everyone in the stairwell. Whatever waited below was connected to the Storm Shield network, and if it was awakened the wrong way, Halcyon Bay could lose its protection, its balance, and its future. Aiden felt that danger in his hand as the frost engine pulsed like a living heart, and he knew they could not turn back now. They moved down together one step at a time, while the stairwell turned darker and the city sounds faded into a low, distant hum. Myra kept one hand near the wall, following exposed signal lines that ran under cracked metal plates and into old service marks. She pointed out narrow channels in the floor and said the system was not built like a normal utility route, because it had been made to hide something important from the public levels above. That mattered because Halcyon Bay was not only a floating city, it was a city built on layered control, and someone had wanted that control kept secret. Drake did not like the way she said it, but he did not argue, because he also knew the Storm Shield network had power relays running through places no citizen would ever see. Victor said nothing for a long time, but his gaze kept drifting toward a rusted panel with a faded council seal, and his jaw tightened as if each step was dragging up a memory he had buried. Aiden noticed that silence and asked him directly what he recognized. Victor gave a small, careful smile that did not reach his eyes and said that the city council had once promised the Storm Shield network would never be used to control people, only to protect them. He said that promise had been made in rooms like the one they were heading toward, and that was why the hidden chamber mattered. If the system was being used for command instead of defense, then every bridge, tower, and wind rail above them might already be tied to a secret hand. Drake frowned at that and said control was still necessary if chaos came, but Myra shot back that control without truth always became a cage. The argument would have grown louder if the masked wraith had not suddenly lifted one glove and touched the wall, where a hidden latch clicked open with a dry metallic sound. No one had heard a footstep from the wraith, no one had seen a face, and still it had found the door before anyone else. That small act made the danger feel much closer, because it showed the figure knew the path better than any of them. The hidden door opened into the Halcyon Bay storm vault, and the chamber beyond was a circle of old metal walls, pale utility lights, cracked display panels, exposed pipes, and rotating power rings that still moved with a slow, tired hum. The room felt like the buried heart of the city, and every line in the floor seemed to carry heat, wind, or signal into the levels above. Myra stepped forward first, because this was the kind of place an engineer could read before it could be trusted. Her brown hair caught the pale light as she moved, and her eyes widened when she saw the central control column with its broken warning displays and frozen relay tracks. She said the chamber was not just a storage room, but the main control space for the Storm Shield network, and that meant someone could redirect the city defenses from here. That answer changed everything. The city above was not simply protected by weather and towers. It was guided, watched, and possibly trapped by this chamber. Drake looked toward the control column with cold approval because he saw the value of that power immediately. If enemies ever came, whoever held this room could shield the whole city. Victor was not looking at the control column at all. He was staring at a sealed side door with a council crest, and the ghost on his face returned in full. He finally said the person on the other side had once been his mentor, a council strategist named Selene Hart, a woman with white hair who had taught him how the hidden systems of Halcyon Bay really worked. He had believed she left the council years ago, but now he understood she had not left. She had been sealed here or kept here because she knew too much. That was the first real twist in the chamber, and it hit the group hard. Victor, the smooth and careful man who always seemed to know more than he said, was not only a council observer. He had once been a student of the woman who helped design the secret control of the city. That meant his connection to the vault was deeper than anyone had guessed, and his fear was not about the room itself. It was about what Selene might reveal. Aiden looked at Victor and realized the council man was not merely hiding ambition. He was hiding shame. Then the masked wraith moved again, and the chamber changed with it. The figure crossed to the central control column and placed both dark gloves on the frost-coated ring that circled the core socket. The living frost engine in Aiden's hand answered at once, its pale blue veins brightening as if it recognized the place. Cold mist curled from the device, and the hidden signal lines in the floor began to glow one by one. Myra stepped back in alarm and told Aiden that the engine was not just a power source, because it was a key that could freeze motion inside the system and force hidden locks to open. She had guessed that much before, but now the chamber confirmed it. The Frost engine was designed to react to the storm shield network, and if used carelessly, it could lock the whole city in a frozen state. That was the central danger of the story, and everyone felt it now. Drake wanted to use that power to secure order. Myra wanted to use it to expose the truth and fix the system. Victor wanted to find Selene and learn why she had been hidden. Aiden wanted only to keep the city from falling into the wrong hands, but he was also beginning to understand that the Frost engine had chosen him for a reason. The masked wraith turned its blank white mask toward him, then toward the sealed door, and then toward the control column, as if it were asking him to decide what kind of guardian he would become. Aiden stepped closer and found a narrow slot beside the main ring, marked with an old council warning that said the chamber could not be opened without a living core. He pressed the Frost engine into place. The room answered with a deep low pulse, and the control rings spun faster as if the vault itself had awakened from a long sleep. Beyond the sealed side door, a woman's voice spoke through static, calm and clear, and Selene Hart said, as if she had been waiting for years, that they had finally come to hear the truth about Halcyon Bay. The chamber lights flickered. Drake raised his gloves. Myra held her breath. Victor went pale. Aiden kept his hand on the engine, and the frost within it shivered like a warning, because the next truth was already moving toward them from the other side of the door, and this time it would not remain hidden for long. The hidden chamber under Halcyon Bay felt colder now, as if the city itself had drawn a hard breath and refused to let it out. Pale lights buzzed along the old metal walls, and the air carried dust, oil, and the thin taste of storm water running through pipes behind the stone. Aiden stood with his dark coat hanging still around him, his black hair unmoving in the frozen air, and the living Frost engine glowed in his hand like a small heart made of winter. Beside him, Myra, a young woman with brown hair and quick eyes, kept one hand near her tools and the other half raised, ready to react. Captain Drake, a man with gray hair and a rigid stance, spread his steel-gloved hands and stared at the sealed door with a soldier's cold patience. Victor, a slim man with silver hair and a polished face, had gone pale in a way he tried very hard to hide. He wanted control, and he hated any moment he could not command. All of them had come this far because Halcyon Bay was built on a lie, and the lie was starting to crack. The central problem was simple now and terrible. If the truth stayed buried, the city would remain under hidden control, the storm shield network could be turned into a trap, and everyone above the clouds could be forced to obey whoever held the right key. If the truth came out, the people who built that system would be exposed. That was why the voice behind the door mattered so much. Selene Hart, a woman with white hair and a calm, severe face, had just spoken through the static like someone who had planned this meeting for years. She did not sound surprised to see them. She sounded ready. The door split open with a deep metallic groan, and cold air spilled out from the chamber beyond. The first thing they saw was a circular control room built into the bones of the city, a place deeper than the storm vault and older than the clean towers above it. Rotating power rings lined the floor, cracked display panels flickered on the walls, and hidden signal lines ran into the stone like veins. This was the Storm Vault control chamber, the heart of the secret machinery that fed the Storm Shield network. At the far end of the room stood Selene Hart, a woman in a dark council strategist coat with silver seams, her white hair tied neatly back, her posture straight and unshaken. She had the calm of someone who knew every answer already. She looked at Aiden first, then at the frost engine in his hand. "You are carrying the part of the city that was never meant to wake," she said, her voice low and clear. Myra stepped forward before anyone else could stop her. She was not brave because she had no fear. She was brave because she hated lies more than danger. "Then tell us why the city was built around it," she said. "Tell us why my repairs keep finding sealed routes, hidden relays, and old locks nobody remembers." Selene did not answer right away. Instead, she looked at Victor, and that small glance made Drake turn sharply toward him. Victor's mouth tightened, but he kept his smooth expression in place. He wanted the others to see him as a calm council man, not a man who had been steering trouble from the start. Selene finally spoke. "Long ago, Halcyon Bay was not meant to float by itself. It was built as a shield city, a place that would hold the storm shield network together when the sky storms became too strong for normal towers. The living frost engine was placed at the center because its strange living cold could freeze unstable motion and keep the network balanced. But the council learned that if the engine was opened by force, the same power that protected the city could also lock the entire network in place. That would stop the wind rails, stop the bridges, and trap every district under one command." Drake understood the threat at once, and his jaw tightened. As a Guardian captain, he had spent his life believing order kept people safe. Now he saw how order could become a cage. Victor, however, looked almost angry with relief because the motive of the Hidden Council was now plain. They did not want safety alone. They wanted a city they could control without question. They had hidden the truth so no one could challenge them. Selene had once helped them build the system, and now she had turned against them because she had seen what it would become. That betrayal was the first real twist, because the calm woman behind the door was not the enemy of the story. She was one of the first people who had tried to stop it. Aiden listened in silence, but the frost engine in his hand pulsed harder, as if it recognized the chamber and wanted to wake up all at once. The cold around his fingers sharpened, and faint white light ran through the pale crystal veins. Selene noticed and took one careful step closer. "It remembers this place," she said. "It was made to answer the city, not a person." Victor finally found his voice, and when he spoke, it was soft and dangerous. He asked Selene why she had called them here now, after so many years. He asked why she waited until the council tower had already increased pressure on the lower districts and the storm relays had begun to fail. Selene turned to him with a look that stripped away his polished smile. She said the answer was simple. Victor had been preparing to force the living frost engine open in the council tower so he could seize the storm shield network before the rest of the council learned how unstable the city had become. He had planned to blame the lower districts, blame the exiled guardians, and blame Aiden. That revelation landed hard. Drake stepped between Victor and the others, not because he trusted the council man, but because he now saw a threat inside the room. Victor lifted one hand slowly, trying to look offended instead of exposed, but his eyes had changed. The polite mask was slipping. Myra stared at him with open disgust. She had suspected him for a long time, but suspicion became certainty in that moment. The chamber began to shake as the wall displays flashed strange lines of light. Somewhere above them, in the floating city of Halcyon Bay, a relay had failed. The storm towers were trying to correct the problem, and the hidden system was reacting like a wounded animal. Selene said the network was already under strain because someone had triggered an old command path from the council tower. Victor did not deny it. He only smiled a little, and that small smile made the room feel colder than the engine ever could. He said a city needed strong hands, and weak people always misunderstood strong hands. Drake cursed under his breath and raised his gloves. Aiden stayed still, but he could feel the frost engine pulling against his palm, as if it wanted to choose sides on its own. Then the chamber lights dimmed and shadows moved at the edge of the room. A tall shape in a dark robe slid out from behind the rotating rings. The masked wraith had been waiting there all along. No one had heard it enter. No one could read its face behind the smooth white mask. Its dark gloves seemed to drink the light around them. For one hard moment, everyone froze because Selene had clearly not called them alone. The wraith raised one hand toward the chamber floor, and the hidden signal lines beneath the stone began to glow. Myra reacted first because she always noticed a machine before a person. She lunged to a cracked display panel and slammed her tools into the side housing, forcing the nearest power ring to stall. Sparks jumped, the ring shuddered, and the wraith turned toward her. Drake moved like a wall coming alive, planting himself in front of Myra and swinging his steel gloves in a heavy clash that sent the wraith back a full step. Aiden felt the frost engine surge in response to the violence. Cold mist poured from its silver rings and spread across the floor in a low, white sheet. It touched the signal lines and slowed them, freezing the moving light before it could race through the chamber. Selene called out over the noise that the wraith was not here to kill them, but to drag the engine into the lower conduit and lock the city under Victor's command. That made the next move clear. Victor was not just a liar. He was the reason the hidden system was waking up now. He had brought the wraith in to finish what he could not do openly. Aiden finally understood the shape of the whole trap. Victor wanted the city's protection system frozen in place so only his chosen commands would pass through. He wanted Halcyon Bay to obey him from the council tower while everyone else thought the storms had simply grown worse. Aiden had spent years learning how to survive after exile, keeping quiet, following rules, and trusting as little as possible. But now he saw that silence had helped men like Victor. It had protected lies. It had protected fear. So Aiden did the one thing he had avoided for most of the story. He chose to act without waiting for permission. He pressed his hand harder against the living frost engine and let it answer him fully. A pale blue wave rolled out through the control chamber, freezing the moving panels, locking one wall in place, and forcing the wraith to retreat into a narrow corner of shadow. The chamber echoed with alarms from above, and Selene shouted that the city would feel the shift within minutes. She pointed to a second sealed passage behind the control rings and said there was one more truth hidden below them, one that explained why the engine had a living pulse at all. Victor stared at that passage, and for the first time his confidence broke. The frost on the floor crept toward the door, and Aiden saw a thin line of light bleeding through its seam, as if something behind it had just woken up and was waiting for him to arrive. He did not know yet whether it was the answer or the final danger, but he knew one thing clearly. Halcyon Bay was far from safe. The real heart of the conspiracy was still hidden, and the next chamber was about to change everything again. The hidden door finally gave way, and cold white light spilled across the narrow hall beneath Halcyon Bay. The air changed at once, turning dry and sharp, and even the sound of footsteps seemed to slow inside the stone passage. Aiden stood at the front with his black hair still and his pale blue frost engine glowing in his hand, while Myra stayed close behind him with her brown hair tied back and her eyes moving over every pipe and wall. Captain Drake followed with his gray hair slicked by damp air, his heavy gloves clenched hard, and his stern face fixed in a look that showed both anger and fear. Victor came last, silver hair neat, black coat smooth, and that dangerous smile now thin enough to look like a crack. They were no longer walking into a secret room. They were walking into the heart of the problem, and everyone knew it. If the chamber ahead held the truth, then Halcyon Bay could be saved. If it held a trap, then the whole storm shield network could fall, and the floating city above the clouds could lose the power that held its bridges, towers, and arena together. That was why the room mattered, and that was why Victor had gone pale when he saw the frozen seam of light. The chamber opened into the storm vault control chamber, a round underground space lined with dark metal walls, pale utility lights, cracked display panels, and thick signal lines running into the floor. Rotating power rings hung above a central platform, and old control stations sat in rows like sleeping machines waiting to wake. Myra moved first, because she understood machines better than anyone there, and she whispered that the whole room was built to hold one system under lock and key. She explained that the Storm Shield network was not just defense. It was the city's balance, its wind control, its bridge safety, and its hidden emergency path. If the network was frozen in one place, then all of Halcyon Bay could be forced into stillness, drift, or collapse. Aiden listened without speaking because he already understood the real danger. The living frost engine in his hand was not just reacting to the room, it was responding to a larger machine buried somewhere deeper inside the vault. Victor saw that too, and for the first time his calm posture failed him. He asked, in a voice too careful to be honest, who had unlocked this chamber. Drake swung his cold stare toward him and said that a better question was who had built it. That made the silence heavier than any shout, because the answer was now starting to form in front of them. The answer came when one of the cracked panels lit up and showed a broken city map of Halcyon Bay. Thin light lines spread across it like veins, connecting the council tower, the floating arena, and the storm towers on the outer edge. Then a second image came online and everyone saw the same thing at once. The city had a hidden override path. It was old, it was secret, and it could force the entire storm shield network to follow one command source instead of many safe ones. Myra stepped closer and saw the name buried in the system record. Selene Hart. Her face tightened because she knew that name mattered. Selene was not just another council strategist with white hair and a calm, severe face. She had spent years studying emergency systems, power routes, and backup control law, which meant she knew exactly how to make the city obey without raising alarms. But the deeper truth was worse. She had not built this system to protect Halcyon Bay. She had built it because she feared what would happen if the city stayed divided. The storm towers had been weakening for months, and the council had been hiding the failures. Selene believed one guided command could stop panic, prevent bridge failure, and keep the floating city stable until repairs were complete. Her motive made logical sense, and that was what made it so dangerous. She was not trying to destroy the city, she was trying to control it before fear destroyed it first. Victor used that truth like a blade. He stepped forward with his silver hair catching the pale light and said that Selene had only wanted order, but order was exactly what the city needed. He claimed that the old council had grown weak, that Drake had kept too many facts buried, and that Aiden, as an exile, had no right to carry the living Frost engine into a system he did not understand. His words were calm, but his eyes were hard now, and Myra could see that he was no longer hiding his real goal. Victor did not just want to protect the city, he wanted the override path for himself. If he could seize the storm shield network, then he could rule the floating city through fear, all while calling it stability. Drake heard that truth and took one step in front of Aiden, his steel gloves raised and his jaw tight. He admitted then that he had followed Victor deeper into the conspiracy because he thought the council could still be saved from inside, but now he could see that Victor wanted the whole system as a throne. That was the second shock because Drake was not clean either. He had covered signs of trouble to protect public trust, and those lies had helped Victor hide. The room grew colder as blame moved from one man to the next, and Aiden understood that the enemy was not a single person. It was fear, pride, and the need to control what should have been shared. Then the lights dimmed and the masked wraith appeared above the chamber floor on a narrow maintenance bridge that had been empty a moment before. No one heard it enter. No one saw the movement. It simply stood there in a long dark robe with pale lining, a white mask with no mouth, and dark gloves that seemed to swallow the light around them. Myra backed away at once because she recognized that silent shape from the upper vault halls. The wraith had been guiding the hidden passages all along, opening and closing routes, always one step ahead of them. Its motive had been unclear until now. It did not care who ruled the council, and it did not care who got credit. It wanted the Frost engine opened in the right place because only then could it pull the old city lock free and expose what Selene had buried. The wraith raised one hand and every signal line in the room answered with a low hum. The chamber floor began to rotate in wide sections, turning the control room into a moving maze of metal and light. Victor shouted for Drake to secure the core. Drake shouted back that Victor was the one who had caused this. Myra grabbed Aiden by the sleeve and told him the chamber was changing shape to force one person to the center. That meant the room was not just a control chamber, it was a test chamber. Aiden felt the living Frost engine pulse in his hand, soft at first, then stronger, as if it recognized the hidden lock below the floor. He looked at the map, then at the council name, then at the wraith, and he finally understood the shape of the trap. Selene had built a system to freeze the city into obedience if fear spread too far. Victor had found that system and planned to use it for power. Drake had tried to manage the damage and lost control of the truth. And the masked wraith had been moving everyone toward this room so the final lock could be exposed. Aiden stepped onto the rotating center platform, and the Frost engine brightened with pale blue veins that matched the lines in the floor. He did not force it open with rage. He did it with calm because he had learned that power without control only feeds the wrong hand. The device released a cold wave and the hidden rings below the chamber woke up one by one. The signal lines flashed, the cracked panels filled with new data, and a sealed door on the far wall slowly unlocked. For one brief moment, the chamber felt still, and everyone saw a corridor beyond the door leading deeper under the city. But before anyone could move, Victor reached for the command console and tried to seize the system manually. Drake slammed his glove onto Victor's wrist and forced his hand back, and the two men locked in a hard struggle that shook the control station. Myra shouted that the override was active, and that if Victor touched the core again, the Storm Shield network could lock into one command path forever. Above them, the Wraith watched in perfect silence, as if waiting for one final choice to be made. Aiden turned and saw the next corridor glowing with a weak blue pulse like a second heart under the city. He also saw something else, something that changed the shape of the entire mystery. On the wall beyond the open door was a seal of the old council, and under it was a fresh line of writing in Selene Hart's precise hand. It said that the city was never meant to be governed by fear, but fear was the only thing the council could trust once the storm towers began to fail. That was the real twist. Selene had not simply wanted power. She had predicted that Halcyon Bay would split apart when the truth of the failing shield became public, and she had chosen secrecy over honesty because she believed it would save thousands. Her choice was cold, but it was not simple evil. That made the room even harder to judge. Aiden lowered the frost engine a little, and for the first time he felt the weight of carrying truth instead of just power. He understood now that every side in this hidden war had a reason, but not every reason was right. Drake finally broke away from Victor and ordered everyone to move before the chamber reset. Victor stepped back with a furious stare, no longer looking elegant, only cornered. Myra moved to Aiden's side, ready to follow him deeper. The masked wraith slipped into the open corridor without a word, leading them toward the next chamber. And as the rotating floor settled with a heavy metallic groan, Aiden walked forward with steady eyes, knowing that Halcyon Bay was still in danger, knowing that Selene Hart was hiding one more truth, and knowing that the next room would decide whether the floating city could be saved or locked forever under frozen control. The hidden corridor under Halcyon Bay felt colder than the sky above, and every wall around Aiden shimmered with old metal and weak light. Behind him, Myra kept close with quick, careful steps, while the masked wraith moved ahead like a silent guide. Captain Drake followed with a hard stare, and Victor stayed near Selene Hart, watching everything with a calm, sharp smile. The city still hung above the clouds, but its safety now rested on one room hidden deep inside the storm vault. Aiden knew the truth at once. If the living frost engine was opened in the wrong way, the storm shield network would lock the whole city in frozen control. That was what Victor wanted, because he believed fear could hold the city together better than trust. Selene had spent years hiding the secret chamber from the public, telling herself that strict control would protect Halcyon Bay from war, panic, and collapse. But the more she spoke, the more Aiden saw her fear, and he understood that fear had ruled her choices for too long. Then the masked wraith stopped at a sealed door, and the mystery finally broke open. The figure placed a gloved hand on the panel, and the mask split away in the light to show the face of an older engineer who had vanished years ago. He had helped build the first version of the Storm Shield network, and he had hidden himself because he feared what the Council would do with it. His true goal was simple now. He wanted the city freed before the frozen system could turn every bridge, tower, and gate into a prison. Inside the control chamber, the final choice waited in the center ring. Victor tried one last command, but Captain Drake turned on him and ordered the guards to stand down. Selene saw the truth at last and lowered her head because her control had only made the danger worse. Aiden lifted the living frost engine, and Myra helped guide its pulse into the network instead of against it. The cold mist spread through the old lines, not to freeze them shut, but to wake them open. One by one, the storm towers restarted, the bridges steadied, and the city breathed again. When the light returned to Halcyon Bay, Aiden did not smile right away. He looked at the people below, the sky above, and the hands that had tried to rule everything. Then he finally understood what exile had taught him. Power was not meant to be feared or owned, it was meant to be trusted. And as the floating city rose into a safer dawn, Aiden stood with Myra and the others, no longer a broken guardian, but the man who had chosen to save the whole sky.